Coming up next on Public Access TV is Fan to Fan, where we talk about all things sports. Today, my guest is a catcher for the Boston Red Sox through the 1970s. No, it's not Carleton Fisk, but it's the other guy, Bob Montgomery, who capably backed up the Hall of Famer for 10 years. Stay tuned. This may bring back up some of your Sox memories and surely will catch your attention. Welcome to Fan. I'm your host, Dave Hornfischer, a Boston sports fan, and I'm excited today to chat with former Red Sox catcher Bob Montgomery, whose career spanned the decade of the 1970s, and he'll be a featured guest at an exciting Bosox fan club event to be held on October 12th at Jack's Abbey Brewery in Framingham. All are welcome. But first, let's chat here with Bob. Welcome, Bob. It's great to have you as a guest on Fan to Fan.
Delighted to be with you.
Well, why don't we just start by asking, first of all, let me just recite a couple of facts that people out there may not know. You caught 387 games, you had 1,185 at-bats, 306 hits, batting average 258, 23 of the hits went out of the park, an OBP of 296, that's pretty good, OPS of 669. Can you believe it? I looked this up. You faced 252 pitchers in your career. You hit 308 versus Jim Palmer. Pretty good. You hit 118 against Vida Blue.
Yeah.
and you went 0 for 6 against Nolan Ryan. And probably everybody else did too. But
actually, Dave, I was on a long list of those guys that went 0 for against Nolan Ryan.
You sure were. I think Carleton only hit 150 or something.
I always played against them. When we played, Fisk didn't play. They put me into play. That's what you had so many at-bats against them.
That's what you get when you have some priority in the clubhouse, I guess. But let's go back to the beginning a little bit. How did a kid born in Nashville find his way to Fenway by 1970?
I was a very good, as you can imagine, very good high school athlete. I was a very good football player, a very good obviously a better baseball player. I played all three sports. I played baseball, football, basketball, but obviously baseball was my best. We had some great amateur programs in Nashville growing up, starting with the Little League level. I started playing, I think, Little League baseball when perhaps I was 8 years old, something like that. I went from Little League into Babe Ruth and into American Legion. And in high school baseball, I played during all that time. So my father was a very good amateur player, I am told. I never saw him get to play because he'd hurt himself prior to an age where I could watch him play. But my brother and I both played. My brother played a couple of years professionally in the Red Sox organization as a pitcher. But as I got a little better in high school, you had more scouts coming to watch you, more scouts coming, and then finally it got down to the point where you started to get a few phone calls from scouts representing different organizations, and they came along and made their offers, and the most attractive offer I had was by far from the Boston Red Sox. A gentleman by the name of George Digby was the scout.
Famous scout, as I recall.
Very, very good. Yeah. He was from Mississippi, or New Orleans, I think he was from. But he signed a lot of the guys out of Mississippi, George Scott, a number of other guys. And that's how I got started. I graduated on a Monday from high school. Thursday night in 1962, after that Monday, I was in Olean, New York as a professional player.
Without going through all the places, how did you end up as a catcher? You weren't a catcher to start.
I was not assigned as an outfielder. Then the second year, they sent me to spring training as a third baseman. I went to Waterloo, Iowa, and I was playing third base there for a manager named Len Oakley, who had caught in the big leagues and had coached in the big leagues as a catcher. And he said to me one day about halfway through the season, as I was leading the league in third baseman for errors, he said to me, "Have you ever think about catching?" And I looked at him and I said, "No." So he didn't say anything. Another week, maybe 10 days go by, and he said, "You give any more thought about that catching?" And I said, "No." He says, "Well," he said, "I'm going to be honest with you." He said, the people at the front office in Boston feel like if you have any chance of advancing in baseball, be a good idea for you to learn to catch. I said, when do we start?
That sort of will sell them.
So that led on to that, and at the end of that year, I started doing some catching. The next year, as a catcher, went back to the Midwest League, made the All-Star team, and then started to progress up through. You didn't make big jumps in those days. You didn't have but 16 major league teams then.
Right.
So there wasn't a lot of advancement from players going from the minor leagues to the big leagues because you just simply didn't have that many teams.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're at Fenway.
Well, I wouldn't call it all of a sudden.
Well, no, but it was some 8
or 9 years later. Yeah, I'd gotten a little better all the time.
Okay.
The Red Sox had a couple of catchers come on. The same guy that signed me, George Digby, signed a guy named Jerry Moses. And when they signed him, he kind of went in front of me. He had been a catcher before. We played together in Pittsfield. Then at the end of the year in '66, when I was playing at Pittsfield, a catcher got hurt. His last name was Johnson. Our AAA club then was in Toronto in '66. They sent me there to finish the year. Then after that, I started doing a lot more regular catching. And then through the last year of 1970, when I played in Louisville, I really had a tremendous year playing there. Not only batting, but handling pitching staffs and catching.
So what do you remember about your first days at Fenway?
The first thing I really remember, and to this day, I will never forget it, when I walked up those steps, coming out of the tunnel, and walked up to the top, when I could see that big green wall, and how big it was and how monumental it looked, because it was obviously so very high. I didn't know how high it was at the time, but that was the thing that caught me most. And then the second thing, we were playing a night game, and I couldn't get over how bright it was in the ballpark, because playing in minor league parks, as you get a little higher, you play in better lit ballparks, but not like Fenway Park. It was almost like playing in the daytime.
So that was 1970.
1970.
Did you get to play much in '70?
I played a little bit toward the end of the year. That was one of those situations where they brought you up to the big leagues and they let you play. I didn't do very well batting at the end of that time, but I did fine catching.
Well, was Fisk there in '70?
No, he was not.
Okay.
I was with, we had a guy named Don Pavletic, a guy named Tom Satriano, and I believe that was it.
Yeah. But then, and then through the '70s, through up into '75, you were catching more and more all the time. And
well, and I did a lot of the catching in 1971. The Red Sox made a trade for a guy named Dwayne Josephson from the Chicago White Sox. It was kind of ironic because when I was playing in the Midwest League, I used to go watch him play college ball at Iowa State, which was just outside of Waterloo. So I thought it was kind of strange that I wound up playing behind him. But he had a collision at home plate with Dave Johnson of the Baltimore Orioles, and he had a tough chest situation that developed into pericarditis, and that really kind of cut his career short. I caught most of that year, and then started '72 as the catcher, and it was a guy named Fisk. A guy named Fisk came along.
He came along.
And
you might remember that.
A couple of things great happened about that. I was probably not good enough, to be honest with you, to be an everyday player, but I turned and developed into being very, very good at what I did, being a backup guy. When Fisk needed a day off, I'd go in to play. And then when '75 came along, he had the bad injury at spring training.
Right.
He got hit with the foul tip in the groin area and cost him a lot of time. About the first month of the season, I was very good in 1975 for the Red Sox. Did most of the catching. I think if I'm not mistaken, I believe I was leading the team in RBIs for the first month. And then he got well and came back. And the rest of that, I made a Hall of Famer out of him, and he gave me a 10-year career in the big league. So we were happy on both sides.
Well, it was important to him to have somebody like you, I'm sure. I noticed in 1973, I happened to find this old Red Sox program that I picked up, and you were batting almost 350 in the middle of the year. And I think he ended up hitting 320. And
I think about every other year,
Yeah.
Dave, somewhere in there, I was right at or about 300.
Yeah.
So I was an off and on player. How's
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
That worked.
Yeah. Well, then came 1975, of course, that classic season. Everybody, you talked about the Fisk injury. Was Tiant new that year in 75, or they'd got?
No. Tiant came to us, I believe, in 1972.
Why don't we talk a little bit about Louis? We have a picture of him coming up here.
Terrific. A great guy. A terrific teammate. He went through a lot of stuff in his career. He started out in the Cleveland organization. I had mentioned to you a little bit earlier when we were chatting around. I saw him pitch in 1964. And that's when Louis Tiant could really throw hard. Now, nobody in the Boston area ever saw him throw really hard unless you happen to go see a Cleveland game. Then he hurt his arm and left Cleveland. I don't know what the deal was. Went to Minnesota.
Great pickups the Red Sox made, that's for sure.
Well, he went to Atlanta, and he had a contract with Atlanta that said that if he wasn't in the big leagues by the end of April, they were to release him. And I think it was in 72 when that happened. As soon as he was released, he became a Red Sox player.
And then in 75, he's throwing shutouts in the World Series and
unbelievable.
hitting home runs. He had a big hit in the 75 season.
Yes, he did. Wasn't a home run, but he had a big hit.
I'm thinking,
But he did have his Game 4 start for us in Cincinnati. This will never be matched by anybody again. I don't care whose name you bring up. It was never done before. It'll never be done since. In that fourth game, Louis threw 163 pitches. Let me say that again. 163 pitches and pitched 9 innings for the game. In the eighth inning, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
In the 8th inning, he's got a guy at second, I believe, or a guy at first, and 2 outs. We're leading 4-2. Darrell Johnson is coming from the third base dugout to take him out of the game. As Darrell got to the foul line, Tiant is yelling at him, "Don't come out here. I'm going to give you this a ball." Darrell turned around, went back in the dugout. Louis finished the game. We win.
One other memory of the 75 series that everybody remembers. Maybe one people don't remember. I know you had an at-bat right near the end.
Yeah, what about it?
Well, you have a memory of that. You were before Yaz made the last out, I know.
The ultimate out.
I know Yaz gets the credit for making the last out.
I pinch hit for Doug Griffin. I don't remember who the pitcher was for Cincinnati. Concepcion was the shortstop, and I mean, I hit a rocket that was about, maybe 2 steps to the left field side of second base, but that's right where Concepcion was playing. That's how well scout reports all turned out in those days. And for years after that, Sparky Anderson would never let me forget. I knew you were going to hit the ball there. That's why I had him playing there.
Now, that's a story that's not in the highlights. That's
no, you wouldn't see that one.
No, but I mean, had you got a hit, Yaz might have hit a home run.
Well, yeah,
and you'd have won
sure,
the game,
And if I'd gotten a hit, I would have been 1,000 batting average for a World Series player. But I didn't, and I wasn't.
Any other career highlights, just quickly here, that you remember? Maybe did you ever catch a no-hitter or an almost one?
I almost caught a no-hitter, yes, with Roger Moret, left-handed pitcher we had. We're playing the Chicago White Sox on a Wednesday afternoon game, and Moret didn't have very much of a breaking ball. He had a very good fastball. He had pretty good control. He had a very good changeup. And that's all we threw that day, just about with fastballs and changeups. And with 2 outs in the top of the 8th inning, Dick Allen hit a big high chopper just to the left field side of the bag. Burleson got to it and made a nice play on it and threw it, but Allen was a very, very good runner, and he beat it out for the base hit. That was the only hit the White Sox got. That was the closest I came to handling a no-hitter.
Did you get a walk-off hit?
To me?
Yeah.
No, we won the game. But
no, I mean other games. In any other?
I get a walk-off hit?
Or hits that you remember. Memorable hit.
I didn't get a walk-off hit. This is kind of an interesting story you'll appreciate. We're playing in Chicago. I don't remember what year this was, maybe 78. And they had a left-hand pitcher named Steve Keeley pitching for them. And we get the extra innings top of the inning, there's a man on and 2 outs, and Keeley throws me a fastball, and I hit it out of the ballpark. Well, we win the game 4-2, and the next day they release Steve Keeley.
Well, okay. I guess if he couldn't get, yeah, okay. Well, we were talking before. You were recalling the 2 home runs you hit against Jim Palmer, who I researched. You hit over 300 against. I'm always amazed at how ball players can remember specific moments. I mean, I just threw that at you when you walked in the door, and you practically knew where you were holding the bat. I mean.
Well, when you hit home runs off of sure to be Hall of Famers, it's not too easy to forget them. You know what I mean? You remember those. It goes down iron hard. I hit better pitchers better than I did borderline pitchers, let's say.
Yeah.
I had an instance in Fenway Park. Actually, this was a walk-off homer. I had a guy, Kansas City had a guy named Doug Bird.
Oh, yeah.
Was their big-time reliever. And this is when relievers came in, closers came into the game in the 7th inning then.
Right.
I had a home run off him in the bottom of the 7th inning to give us a 4-2 lead over the left field wall. And then somehow the score got tied. I was the leadoff hitter in the bottom of the 10th inning, and I hit another home run off Doug Bird to win the game. His manager's still screaming at him to this day.
And he didn't get released. He was
no, he didn't get released.
Yeah, I remember that name. Yeah. So you had a 10-year career. Our time's kind of beginning to run down here a little bit, so I want to get to some other stuff. But how did you make a decision to retire, or did the Red Sox make it for you?
I had hurt my arm at the end of 1979. I messed up the muscles on the ends. If I'd been a pitcher, they would have called it a Tommy John situation. Yeah. So at the end of the year, I told the Red Sox, look, don't protect me on a 40-man roster list. I was too old to have surgery. If I was going to have surgery, that was going to cost me another year, so I would have been able to play anyway. So I said, just do me a favor. Don't protect me on a 40-man roster. Just invite me back to spring training, and we'll go from there. I go back to spring training. Everything is fine. We go through all the whole things. Don Zimmer's the manager. We're playing a Wednesday afternoon game against the Dodgers. I throw out Bill Russell twice, trying to steal second, and I get a double and a single in the game. So, I mean, I'm golden.
Yeah.
Well, the next morning I get up and I'm getting dressed to go to the ballpark, and I go to splash water on my face. The left hand keeps going and the right hand doesn't move.
Oh, no.
So I looked down and it looked like somebody had implanted a softball in my elbow about this big.
Oh.
So I said, I'm done. So I go to the ballpark. Charlie Moss is the trainer. I'm there about 7:30 in the morning. Nobody's there but me and a couple of the other staff people. I said, Charlie, I said, when Popeye, that was Don Zimmer, we call him Popeye. I said, when Popeye gets into the park, come let me know. I need to go talk to him. So I don't know, it's 30 minutes later. Charlie comes, gets me. He says, Zim's in his office. I said, okay. So I go into Zim's office. He says, what's wrong? I just go like this. He says, don't say anything. He says, they're getting ready to sign you. We'll sign you. I said, no.
Oh, really?
We're not going to do that. I said, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm going to go pack my stuff. If you need me for anything, which you probably won't, I said, but if you need me for anything, I'll be at the Lake Region Yacht and Country Club where I was a member playing golf. That was it.
Wow. And then a few years later, you were in the broadcast booth.
I luckily got into the broadcast business. WITS at the time hired me at the end of my baseball career to possibly go in the booth and take a spot when Ken Coleman was going to retire. Each day I did a talk show with.
We have a picture of you with Ned Martin, I think.
What a terrific man. Terrific man.
Mercy.
Fabulous. Just an absolute great guy to work with. Worked with a great pace. He was great in teaching me areas to go to and areas to stay away from. He was really fabulous. I was doing a talk show with Larry Claflin and Cliff Keen every afternoon. And when that show was over, I took a tape recorder, go to Fenway Park and I would do the game on a tape recorder. That's what they had me do. Then after the end of 2 years, Ken Coleman decided he wasn't going to retire. But Ken Harrelson was going to leave and go to Chicago. So I went in and applied for the TV job and wound up with it. Fortunately, and I had a great time with it. Working with Ned was fabulous. I also worked with Sean McDonough and during that time. I'll tell you a story about Ned if we have time.
Sure.
Every day before a game, you would get a little pack of notes, stats, and like different notes about different players on your home team and the visiting team. So I'd be in the booth doing my lineup and all my numbers, and I'd be flipping the pages. I would go along and mark spots on the notes that if something came up into the game, I could find it and we could talk about it. Well, he would look through the same thing, we'd turn them like this, and he'd throw the thing over on the counter. Game would start, we get into the game, and before I know it, he's quoting exactly from these notes. And I said to him one day, I said, "You have a photographic memory?"
Yeah.
He says, "No, why do you say that?" I said, "Well, you read the notes one time, you don't ever look at them again, and you get them all right, you must have a photographic memory." But I had a great time with him. Really, really good man.
You didn't have to do all the commercials that every pitch was brought to you by Shaw's Supermarket.
No, we didn't do those. Once in a while we did them, but not too much. So, I'll tell you something else that's really strange that catches my eye now, speaking of commercials. We had about 4 or maybe 5 big sponsors then. You didn't have all the big sponsors then. You had a beer sponsor, a car sponsor, 2 or 3 maybe other off things. You never ever, and I laugh every time I see these now, you never ever saw a like company commercial follow one. If you had an automobile commercial for Ford, there wasn't one that came from Mercury behind it or Dodge. Now you see maybe 3 or 4 of the same commercials right in a row, never even thought of.
So a lot of catchers, backup catchers. I mean, you got 3 ex-Red Sox backup catchers at this point who are managers: Ross, Cash, Melvin. Did you ever consider managing, or wouldn't you?
No, I did not. I didn't. I had no desire to stay in the game as a coach and or become a manager. I didn't.
But catchers make good managers, right?
I think they do for a lot of reasons, because you kind of run the game if you're a catcher.
Yeah.
You're calling a lot of the pitches. You're responsible for a lot of the shifting people out in different positions. It was your responsibility to do the signs with the infielders if you were going to throw through on a first and third attempted steal. So I think you had a lot of insight into how the game was going to be run and how you would make those decisions. And a lot of time, the decisions were left up to us as a catcher. It wasn't always necessarily the manager that did that. So it's easy for me to understand how catchers, whether they starting catchers or backup catchers, could become managers and be pretty good at it.
Yeah. So speaking of catchers, one of the things I should have asked you before, what was your relationship with Fisk through the years?
Terrific.
Yeah. I imagine the two of you would work together.
Oh, we worked together all the time. We constantly worked on how we talk about hitters. We would watch hitters all the time. We would have a meeting, a club, a pitching staff infielder meeting prior to the start of every series. Frank Malzone, who was really, really terrific at his job, was our front scout. If we were playing, let's say, the Yankees tomorrow, he'd be wherever the Yankees were, either in New York or on the road, scouting them and then giving us a handwritten report. We go over that report with our pitchers, and then we would use that. We didn't have the iPads that we could go and look into and all that. It had to go up here. And then make adjustments as a catcher sitting that close to a hitter. This is why I often think you see a lot of pitches that are called from the dugout. I'm not in favor of that for a lot of reasons, but as a catcher sitting that close to a hitter, I can see him make little small adjustments that you can't see from the dugout. So Fisk and I both prided ourselves in knowing what our best pitcher's pitch was, knowing how to get our best pitcher's effort on that best pitch, and then making adjustments to the hitters. I never forced a pitch on a pitcher unless I could go out and talk to him about it, because I always felt I was better off getting the wrong pitch with the best effort than I was the correct pitch with less than a best effort.
Okay.
So we kind of had a good understanding with our entire pitching staff for the whole time we were there. It worked well.
Working well with Tion as a catcher, not as a person, but just
couldn't make a bad call.
You couldn't.
No. You simply couldn't make a bad call. He had great control. If let's say he had a 78% day, he didn't have one of those days where he had his really good stuff. He'd make adjustments off of that so that his 78% day might get up to an 85% day. If he got to 85%, he was going to beat you. That's just the way it worked.
Yeah. Well, we only got a couple minutes left here, but let's just talk a little bit about today's baseball. A couple of things that are, I mean, there's so much that's different. I would assume the pitch clock is probably good, but as a catcher, does that force you to rush things a little bit?
No, as a matter of fact, for me, you can take 5 more seconds off the pitch clock.
Really?
As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
One thing it stopped, it's gotten more hitters into the box where they don't adjust the gloves all the time.
Yeah.
It certainly has picked up the pace of the game. I don't think that it hampers the game at all. There are a few things that I don't like. Baseball is a game of outs. Okay?
Yeah.
It's a game of outs.
27. Yeah.
Whoever can most effectively get those 27 outs usually wins. Offense is wonderful. If I get 2 runs and I pitch well and play defense, that's all I need. So one thing I don't like that they got rid of the shift.
Really? Yeah.
I don't like that. It's a game of outs now.
Yeah. Okay.
If I want to play and pitch a guy a certain way to let him hit the ball that way, make it out. Let him learn to hit the ball the other way.
Yeah.
Or do something different. And I don't like the extra inning things where you start a guy at second base with nobody out. That to me, that's horrible. Horrible. And I'll give you a perfect example if I've got time here to tell you. If my 6th place hitter makes the last out, he's the guy that goes to second base. My 7th, 8th, and 9th batters are up. The next team comes in to hit. Let's say their number 2 hitter made the last out.
Yeah.
He's at second. Now I've got my 3rd, 4th, and 5th batters coming up.
Yeah.
I just don't like the way that works at all.
Yeah. Well,
and obviously they didn't like it in postseason because they didn't use it.
Yeah. So 40 seconds about the current Red Sox. What's going on this year and next year?
As I said, the game of baseball is a game of defense. They do not have enough pitching.
Yeah. Yeah.
They do not field well enough.
Yeah.
Their offense is probably a little bit above average, but if you take a so-so pitching staff, defense it nicely, it becomes a good pitching staff. If you take a good pitching staff and defense it nicely, it becomes a very good pitching staff.
You know, and that's a good place to end on, I'm afraid. We kind of came to the end of our 28 minutes. I think I could have talked for 28 hours probably with you, Bob, and only covered half your stories. You're like going to the Louvre and trying to find art. But you know, if folks want to hear a little more from Bob and a great writer, Herb Crehan, join both of them and us. Bosox Club is having a wonderful event at Jack's Abbey on October 12th at 6 o'clock. Check it out on the Bosox Club website, bosox.com, bosox.org, O-R-G, bosoxclub.org. We'll put it up there. And join us, and you'll probably hear a few more stories from this absolute Red Sox legend. Bob, thank you so much.
Dave, great to be with you. Had a blast.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.